is there a truly reality out there that humans could really know? It's an age-old battle between realists and absolutists. God is not great, how religion ruins everything. And yet it's utterly and totally ridiculous. We need to live for something beyond ourselves. In the 1900s, or maybe the 1800s, I don't even remember when he lived, the French writer Guy de Maupassant wrote this fabulous little short story called The Necklace. And it told about this woman, kind of a Madame Bovary, if you know the story, who was very frustrated with her life. She had married a clerk, and the clerk they sort of lived a, kind of a mediocre life and so on. And she was very unhappy. She wanted more in life. She wanted to have more riches. She just was very unhappy. Well, one day her husband got invited to a fancy ball, and he invited and said to the wife, we can go to the ball. And she didn't want to go because she said she had nothing to wear. And then he finally talked her into it, and we were going to get her a dress, and they were going to borrow a necklace. And we'll pick up the story with the necklace and what happens in this fascinating little account. Anyway, he finally talks her into going, and she has a wealthy friend. And she asked her friend if she could borrow the necklace for the ball. Well, they borrow the necklace and they get all decked out and they have a wonderful night. The woman with the happiest time of her life. Fancy, fancy party. She danced. The clerk fell asleep early, what you expect. And she danced and she looked beautiful with her necklace and her dress. And anyway, the party ends and they go home and they go back. And as they get to the house, the woman suddenly realized she lost the necklace. She lost the necklace that she bothered. And they went back and they looked everywhere and they couldn't find it. And they went to a jewelry store and they saw the exact necklace. And the necklace was worth 36,000 francs. Well, they'd have to work years to be able to pay 36,000 francs. And they looked and they looked. Well, the bottom line is, he hocked everything that they had. They did everything that they had, and it took them years. Well, he borrowed and bought the necklace and gave it back to the woman, and then they spent years and years of their life just wearing them down, trying to earn the money back, to pay back the creditors, to pay back the lenders. I mean, they pretty much destroyed their life trying to pay that debt off. And the story picks up a few years later, I don't know, 5, 10 years later, whatever. And the woman, name was Matilda, was walking through a park, just worn and haggard because, their life was destroyed getting that money. And she sees the woman. She sees the woman who she had borrowed the necklace from. And the woman saw her in the park and said, Matilda, what happened to you? You look like you aged 50 years. And then weeping, Matilda just sort of told them the whole story. Told them how when they borrowed the necklace, they lost the necklace and spent all those years to earn the 36,000 francs to get it back. And then the story ends where the woman looks at her and says, oh, my poor Matilda, mine were false. They were not worth over 500 francs. I think the message of Guy de Maupassant's necklace should be obvious. Basically, don't spend your life doing things that mean nothing. But suppose, though, it's not just the things that we do that mean nothing. Suppose life itself means nothing. Suppose the couple are a metaphor for human existence, period. Struggling, working hard, exhausting ourselves for what? To die, and our legacy's left to those who will die too, and on and on and on until the sun becomes, a red dwarf or something like that and blows up, considering what science tells us about the fate of the universe, that the universe is either going to blow up, burn out, or fall back on itself in a big crunch. If so, what does anything we do mean? Spanish writer Miguel de Unamuno wrote, must I declare to you the supreme vacuity of culture, of science, of art, of good, of truth, of beauty, of justice, of all these beautiful conceptions, if at last, in 4 days or 4 millions of centuries, it matters not which, no human consciousness shall exist to appropriate this civilization, this science, this art, this good, this truth, justice, and all the rest. Years ago, a cabbie told how he had was driving his cab, and philosopher and writer Bertrand Russell, famous, one of the most famous philosophers, entered his cab. And the cabbie wanted to take advantage of having such an opportunity. I mean, how often you get to ask questions to one of the 20th century's greatest thinkers? So finally, he looks at Bertrand Russell and says, "Sir Russell, Lord Russell, what's it all about?" And much to his surprise, Bertrand Russell looked him in the rear view mirror with kind of a blank stare and admitted, he said he didn't have any idea. You know what? One of the most influential thinkers of his generation, and he didn't have any idea? If Russell didn't, what about the rest of us, not so ungraciously endowed with the intellect and education and experience of Sir Bertrand Russell himself? Samuel Beckett, the playwright, once said, "What do I know about man's destiny? I could tell you more about radishes." There's no answer key, it seems, in the back of the book. Nor do the stories end with us living happily ever after. Most don't live happily, and none, it seems, ever after. Rather, our stories are often tragedies bordering on farce. If human existence is a struggle for survival of the fittest, it's tough luck, because in the end, even the fittest don't survive. Maybe their genes do, but that's it. According to the selfish gene theory, Richard Dawkins, human beings are just gene machines. We just exist to keep our genes going. He said evolution is wrong. It's not the purpose of evolution to keep the species going. It's just to keep the genes going. As a chicken is just an egg's way of making more eggs, humans are just genes' ways of making more genes. When we have served our purpose, we can be cast aside. This is what Dawkins said. There was a poem mocking the idea that we can find meaning in the life at the level of DNA. Albert Goldbarth wrote about this woman lying in bed, marveling over Watson and Crick's discovery of the DNA molecule. She goes, "The shape, do you see? There is shape. There is an organizational pattern anchoring us, despite the overwhelming flux of thisness and thatness, anchoring us, explaining us. There is a field of neural patterns she can conjure up now from the deepness of her body's own unknown, unlit, invisible layer, and commune with something stable and greater than anyone's life. Of course she weeps, of course. This changes everything." Of course it does. How nice to know that we are, in the words of British comedy troupe Monty Python, simply spiring corals of self-replicating DNA. That explains it all, our grief, our sorrows, our pains, our disappointments. Our existence now is full of meaning and purpose. It's all there, wrapped in the coils of DNA. And yet I'm sorry, to try to find the answers to life in the DNA helix, to try to find it in there, it's almost like studying paint chemistry in order to understand the key to Van Gogh's art. Maybe Bertrand Russell's explanation for the universe is the best one. He said, in the visible world, the Milky Way is a teeny fragment. Within this fragment, the solar system is an infinitesimal speck, and on the speck of our planet is a microscopic dot. On this dot, tiny lumps of impure carbon and water, of complicated structure, with somewhat unusual physical and chemical qualities, crawl about for a few years until they are dissolved into elements from which they are decomposed. No wonder, when asked by the cabbie, "What's it all about?" Russell had no answers, unless his quote above is the answer. I don't know. Somehow it just doesn't seem right, does it? Doesn't seem complete just to think everything could be found in the DNA, or it could be found in the genes, or it could be found. I don't know. It's just something in me tells me there's got to be more to it. No wonder Russell didn't have an answer. That was his understanding of how we got here. That's his understanding of how it ends. It leaves us with nothing. You have nothing. Just doesn't seem to fit the facts. Just seems there's more to us than just nothing. I don't know. Can't prove it, but just something in my heart tells me that's all wrong.